Controversy and Max Verstappen, they seem to go hand in hand, don't they? Once again, Max was involved in another incident in what happened to be a very controversial ending to the Spanish Grand Prix, which was in no doubt the biggest talking point of what was a pretty eventful final race at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Verstappen has never been one to shy away from a fight on track or show his true feelings, and we got both of those in an abundance. As his Grand Prix began to unravel, he went from pushing the McLarens hard for victory to then seeing an almost certain podium finish slip away through a poor strategy and then his late collision with his old mate George Russell. So let's run through Max's race up until the point of the incident, then discuss what happened afterwards and whether the penalty he received was correct. Max started from third on the grid and he immediately split the McLarens when he got ahead of Norris at the start at the first corner, but he then struggled to really keep up with Piastri on pure pace and dropped to around 4 seconds behind. Dropped into the clutches also of Norris and didn't really put up a fight when Lando sailed past into turn 1 a few laps later. And that's when Red Bull began to look at their options on strategy. They called in Max for his first stop on lap 13, and it wasn't until 8 laps later that McLaren reacted by pitting Norris, and then the lap afterwards they pitted Piastri. So that meant that Max effectively undercut both of them and jumped into the lead of the race. But with a massive tyre offset, it was always going to be a struggle to keep them behind, so that's why Red Bull then didn't wait too long to bring Max in for his second stop on lap 29, and that's when it became clear to everyone that he was actually on a 3-stop strategy. McLaren actually didn't seem too fazed by this. They were clearly happy to stick with the favoured 2-stop strategy that everyone was mainly running, and that's when really the battle began between McLaren and Max. Could Verstappen, even with that extra stop, somehow overhaul the McLarens and beat them? It was going to be a long shot because McLaren had been tipped to dominate because they had shown such strong pace throughout practice and in qualifying, having locked out the front row, but it was always worth a gamble and worth trying something different to try and beat them. I think it took a while for McLaren to realise that they actually had a real race on their hands. All of a sudden, Verstappen had dragged himself into contention, and that's when McLaren had to get on the radio and tell Norris and Piastri, actually, do you want to up your pace a bit because Max is quite a threat. And by the time that Max emerged from his third and final stop, he was within range of the McLarens. You could see both of them, and was actually at one point within a second of Norris as they struggled to make their way through the back markers. That's when the race completely changed because we had a late safety car deployed because Kimi Antonelli had gone off at turn 10 with engine troubles. So what would the top 3 do? In the end, it's a straight choice. Do you pit for new tyres or do you carry on and get track position? In the end, all of them came in and pitted for new tyres. So when they left the pits and got back out on track, McLaren were on used soft tyres, but Verstappen mysteriously was on a new set of hard tyres, as that was the only set of tyres that he had left available. It didn't take long for Max to be like, what the hell have you put me on this tyre for? He was really questioning the strategy, and you couldn't really blame him because in hindsight, surely the better option for Red Bull was to leave Max out. Sure, he'd have been on older tyres compared to the 2 McLarens, but it surely would have given him a better chance, even if it was only a slightly better chance, of defending for them. And no doubt that Max would have really tried to defend his position. You know, Max never backs down from a fight. So maybe he would have been able to hold both of them back, or at least hold one of them off, and finish second. I found it really bizarre considering that Red Bull knew that they only had one set of hard tyres available and that they weren't seen by anyone as their favoured race tyre. In fact, no one had run them in the race up until that point. And sure enough, because of the several laps that they spent behind the safety car, it meant that Max's tyres weren't as up to temperature as all the others because he couldn't generate as much tyre temperature as the cars around him, which meant that as he came out of the final corner on the race restart, he almost lost the car. It was an amazing save, to be fair to him, but he got on the curb, lost the rear, had a real quick snap. Leclerc's Ferrari was the car behind, and he took full advantage of Max's mistake as he was able to draw alongside and sweep past, but mysteriously he began to move across to the left, and the two actually did make contact on the pit straight. He admitted afterwards, Leclerc, that he was actually trying to sort of squeeze Max more over to the left hand side of the track as he was trying to pass him. And then Russell behind had a great tow from both of them, which meant he had a lot of speed going down the straight, and he tried to follow Leclerc through at turn 1, but instead ended up forcing Max wide, and Max went off the track and stayed ahead as he rejoined from the runoff area. This then brought up the long-standing debate over what the racing rules are, but for me there was absolutely no question that George was not ahead at the apex and he wasn't fully in control of the car, because he did have a sudden movement of the rear of the car, which meant he wasn't fully in control, and that's where he sort of barged Max wide onto the runoff area. So that's why for me there was no reason why Red Bull had to tell Verstappen that he would have to give that place back. It was Max's to keep. But Red Bull weren't too sure whether the stewards would investigate this, whether they actually said something to them, who knows, but they quickly got on the radio and told Max to give the place back to George. He wasn't too happy about having to do this, but it looked as though he was going to play ball and let Russell back through, because he slowed down just before turn 5. But then he came off the brakes and ran into the side of Russell's car. And I've got to say, in real time, it did look deliberate. This for me was obviously a combination of Verstappen being frustrated at how the team had left him on the wrong tyre for the final few laps after the safety car restart, and also the anger at the fact that they told him to let George back past, even though he felt he wasn't obliged to. He should have kept that place. That's what led to him inexplicably ramming into the side of Russell's Mercedes. That's when his head had completely gone, and it's almost as if he'd lost complete interest in the race. I completely understand why Max was frustrated, because he went from an outside chance of winning the race to then seeing his podium just slip away. Drivers show their frustration and anger all the time. It's just part of the sport. We've seen it in the past with other drivers, other world champions. Every now and again, for various reasons, they lose their head. Look at Senna, Schumacher, Vettel, Hamilton. All of them have been in that position, been in those situations before. But what wasn't understandable or acceptable was his collision with Russell, because it went too far and it was blatant. Clearly the stewards agreed, because after Verstappen had finished P5 on the road, he was given then a 10-second time penalty for his part in the clash with Russell. So that dropped him in the final classification down to P10, where he only picked up 1 point. So was the penalty correct? Honestly, I think Max was lucky to get away with just the 10 seconds and nothing more. I think it was a deliberate act through sheer frustration at how his race had fallen apart, and it could have easily have damaged either his or Russell's car. He was unlucky to have lost out to Leclerc on the restart and then be pushed wide by George, but then to intentionally ram your car into someone else's just to show your frustration, that for me, it's unacceptable. In my eyes, I think that the more appropriate penalty that the stewards could have handed out to Max was the equivalent of a drive-through penalty. So that would have equated to roughly around double what he got, so around 20 seconds, which I think would have been fair. It was another example of when things aren't going Verstappen's way, he throws his toys out the pram and takes matters into his own hands by driving outside of what the rules allow. He went too far, and that sets a bad precedent for the drivers that are coming through karting and coming through the junior formulas. Unfortunately for him, when you're a multiple world champion, you are looked at as someone who is supposed to be setting an example as to how a driver should behave both on the track and off it. That's a small price to pay for success. Now, to be fair to Max, he actually has come out on social media and made a statement accepting that he was actually at fault for the incident. He's admitted that it was wrong and that it should never have happened. So credit to him for that, actually. It's not easy always for a driver to hold their hands up and admit that they've made a mistake, because some drivers do actually end up holding their ground and they don't accept that they were to blame for anything, even when it's clear as day that they were the ones at fault. To make matters worse, on the initial incident with Russell at turn 1 on the restart, the FIA actually revealed after the race that after looking at it, they actually wouldn't have interfered after all. They wouldn't have told Max to hand the position back to George. So Red Bull never needed in the first place to tell Max, move aside and let Russell through. So maybe it would have been better for them just to hang on, wait, see how the situation plays out, rather than taking matters into their own hands too quickly. It's also worth mentioning that because of Max's penalty, it means he's now perilously close to being given a race ban. He's currently on 11 points on his licence, and of course, if a driver receives 12, that's when they have to sit out a race. He will actually lose 2 of those points after Austria in 2 races' time, but then he's really got to keep his nose clean, because it won't be then until October that he loses more points on his licence. The points that he lost in Spain has also really hurt Max's title chances. Realistically, he let 14 points slip through his grasp. So that now means that he is almost 2 race wins behind Piastri in the championship. And when you look at McLaren's form, they looked really strong in Spain. That means I think it's going to be a really tall order for Max to be able to turn that deficit around, especially when Red Bull don't look as strong as McLaren's current package. Even for a driver as good as Max, it's going to be a real challenge to stay in contention for the rest of the year. I also have to say that a lot of blame has to go on Red Bull's shoulders for how they handled the whole situation in the last few laps of the race, because it was easily avoidable in terms of both the call on strategy and also them telling Max to hand the position back to Russell. Those two decisions only added to Verstappen's frustration to the point where he completely boiled over. And Red Bull are usually on the ball, but I guess that's where they are at the moment. They're clearly not F1's top dogs anymore. So all in all, do I see this outcome having any effect on Max's driving going forward? No, not in the slightest. Max has always been an aggressive driver. He always pushes the boundaries, goes to the limit of what's acceptable, and sometimes over it. He's never been one to be fazed by criticism, so that's why he's never changed his driving style up until now, and that's why he won't change going forward. Now that he's further back in the title race, he'll probably have the attitude of, I've got nothing to lose now, so I might as well go for it and see what happens. He'll no doubt still take points off McLaren and win some more races this season, but any chances of defending his title now, they look a long shot. They've taken a real huge blow through his incompetence. Well, there you go guys, that's it for today's video. Be sure to let me know in the comment section what you made of the Verstappen-Russell incident and what you made of the penalty that Verstappen was given. Was it the right penalty, or should he have been given a harsher penalty? Also, if you are new around here, don't forget to like the video and do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.